My name is Beatrice, and I am 39 years old. For 14 years, my family believed I worked a dead-end desk job in the basement of a courthouse somewhere. Then, late one night after a corporate launch party, my mother cornered me in the kitchen and ordered me to take the fall for a felony my sister committed. A 12-year-old boy was lying in a coma after a hit and run. It was 11:51 at night. My sister, Vanessa, was still wearing her silk cocktail dress. She leaned against the marble island, swirling a glass of iced water, completely unbothered. She had been driving blackout drunk. She had just left Caleb bleeding on the cold asphalt. There were no tears in that kitchen, no desperate pleas for help. My mother, Catherine, stepped right into my personal space. Her eyes were hard, scanning me like a depreciating asset. "You have no husband," she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You have no children. You work a meaningless desk job. Vanessa rings the bell on Wall Street next month. $15 million is on the line. Do something useful for this family for once." My father, Marcus, remained silent. He simply slid a single sheet of paper across the granite counter. It was a preliminary police statement, completely typed out, claiming I was behind the wheel of the SUV. I stared at the blue ink on the bottom line. My signature was already there. They forged my name before I even walked into the room. I am 39 years old, and for over a decade, my family has comfortably written me off as the resident failure. They genuinely believed I spent my days sorting municipal traffic tickets in a windowless basement. They never once asked for the actual address of my office. If they had, they would have found a federal courthouse. I stared at my forged signature on the police statement. The blue ink was still fresh, slightly smudged at the tail end of my last name. I swallowed the metallic taste of betrayal and pressed my thumb against the cold granite of the kitchen island. My mind slipped back to a summer evening 14 years ago. I had just failed my first bar exam. Marcus stood on the patio of his country club, holding a scotch, and joked to a crowd of investors about his oldest daughter washing out. He chuckled, telling them you cannot win them all. The crowd laughed. Later, in the parking lot, Catherine fixed my collar and told me some people are simply meant to stay in the background. They shattered my confidence that night. They conditioned me to stay quiet, to accept the tiny scraps of their affection, to let their cruelest jokes slide. They broke the girl in the parking lot. Today, I am the one holding the gavel. I stepped away from this kitchen counter and walked out the side door into the garage. The air was thick with the smell of motor oil and burnt rubber. My silver SUV sat parked crookedly in the shadows. The right headlight housing was completely shattered. A jagged crack split the front bumper, and a sickening streak of pale paint clung to the grille. I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. I pushed the ignition button once to wake the battery. The dashboard screen flickered on, illuminating the dark cabin. I tapped the vehicle telematics icon, navigating straight to the paired devices log. One glance at the screen confirmed it. Vanessa's phone, connected at 11:24, disconnected at 11:58. The timestamps matched the exact minute the 12-year-old boy was struck on the pavement. I exported the vehicle log directly to my secure cloud server. The screen flashed a green confirmation checkmark. The evidence was locked. Nobody could delete it. Nobody could tamper with it. I stepped out of the vehicle and walked back to the edge of the house. Through the large bay window, the kitchen was bathed in warm, golden light. Catherine was pulling a fresh bottle of Chardonnay from the refrigerator. She poured a generous glass and handed it to Vanessa. Marcus patted Vanessa on the shoulder, his face relaxed, completely devoid of any guilt. They were actually celebrating. A child was fighting for every single breath in an intensive care unit across town, and my family was toasting to a successful cover-up. They looked so incredibly smug. They assumed I would just absorb this tragedy the way I had absorbed every insult, every dismissive comment, and every forgotten birthday for 14 years. They thought their money and their influence made them utterly untouchable. They wanted a disposable pawn to protect their precious Wall Street initial public offering. Instead, they just handed a loaded weapon to a sitting United States district judge. I turned my back on the window and walked into the dark yard. Let them drink their wine. The quiet desk clerk they manipulated for years was dead. The sun wasn't even up when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A single text message from Vanessa lit up the screen. "Take one for the team." She added a little prayer hands emoji at the end. I stared at the glowing letters. My sister had just left a child bleeding in the street, and she was treating my freedom like a minor inconvenience. An hour later, an official summons hit my inbox. Detective Vance, Charlotte Police Department. He wanted me in interrogation room 4 by 9 o'clock sharp. The email wasn't a request. It was a threat disguised as a formal invitation. Marcus had already made the phone calls. My father treated local law enforcement like his own personal security detail. He wrote the checks for the police union galas. He bought the department's new cruisers. He paid for the exact outcome he wanted. He probably authorized a $250,000 wire transfer to a dark account before he even poured his morning coffee. I walked through the double doors of the precinct at exactly 8:55. The air inside smelled like stale coffee and bleach. I bypassed the front desk entirely and pushed straight through the heavy security doors. Room 4. I grabbed the handle and pushed it open. Detective Vance sat slouched in a metal folding chair. He wore a cheap gray suit and a smirk that screamed he was on my father's payroll. He had the arrogant posture of a man who fought his battles with someone else's money. He slid a chair out with his foot, but did not stand up. He simply tapped a manila folder against the scratched steel table. "Beatrice, glad you could make it." He slid a paper across the metal surface. It was the forged confession. The blue ink caught the harsh overhead light. "Your dad sent the preliminary over. We just need the official version on our letterhead. It's a clean sweep. You sign right here. We process you quietly, and the prosecutor recommends probation. No jail time. Your family takes care of the victim's hospital bills. Everybody wins." He leaned back and crossed his thick arms over his chest. He expected me to tremble. He expected the quiet, invisible desk clerk to lower her head, pick up the pen, and take the punishment. "You are pushing a fraudulent I said. My voice was perfectly level. "You are attempting to coerce a false confession for a felony." Vance laughed. It was a short, ugly sound that echoed off the cinder block walls. "Look, lady, you stamp traffic tickets for a living. Do not play lawyer with me. I have witnesses saying you were driving. I have your dad's statement. You are cornered. Your dad is trying to save you the embarrassment of a trial, so pick up the pen and sign the damn paper." I held his gaze. I let the silence stretch for 3 full seconds. Then, I reached into my leather tote bag. I bypassed the pen he slid toward me. I pulled out my identification wallet and tossed it flat onto the metal table. The heavy gold seal of the United States Federal Judiciary hit the steel with a sharp, echoing crack. Vance looked down. His eyes locked on the badge. He read the words United States District Judge. The smirk vanished instantly. The color drained from his face so fast he looked physically sick. A heavy bead of sweat formed at his hairline and rolled down his jawline. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. His thick hands started to tremble against the table. "I do not stamp traffic tickets, detective," I said, leaning forward. "I sign federal warrants, and I am officially initiating a federal obstruction probe into you, this precinct, and my entire family." Vance stared at the gold seal resting on the scratched metal. His jaw worked, but no sound escaped his throat. He swallowed hard, desperately trying to rebuild his crumbling authority. "You are out of your jurisdiction, Your Honor," he stammered, wiping a thick layer of sweat from his forehead. "This is a local traffic incident, a misdemeanor hit and run. You have no authority here." "It was a traffic incident yesterday," I said, leaning closer to the table. "Today, it is a federal crime." Vance blinked rapidly. "The 12-year-old boy currently fighting for his life is Caleb. He is the son of a key witness currently under federal protection for a multi-state racketeering case. Your $250,000 bribe from my father just crossed state lines. You and my family are now accessories to a conspiracy to attack a federal witness's family. That carries a mandatory minimum of 20 years. Vance sank into his chair. He looked like a deflated balloon. Before he could speak, the interrogation room door swung open, hitting the cinder block wall with a harsh clang. Marcus marched in. He wore his tailored navy suit and an expression of absolute arrogance. He ignored Vance completely. He slammed a thick manila envelope onto the metal table, right next to my badge. "Save your breath, Beatrice," Marcus sneered, pulling out 2 heavy cream-colored documents. "You always were too smart for your own good, but you forgot who built this family. You forgot who holds the real power." He slid the papers toward me. "Property transfer deed, backdated and notarized 30 days ago. It legally transfers the SUV into your name. And this," he tapped the second page with a manicured fingernail, "is a sworn affidavit stating you explicitly handed the keys to Vanessa last night. Knowing she was intoxicated, you gave her the car. My father smiled. It was the same cold, calculating smile he wore at the country club 14 years ago. He thought he possessed the ultimate trump card. You want to play federal judge, go ahead. You are an accomplice to your own crime. If Vanessa goes down, you go to federal prison with her, withdraw the probe, or I ruin your career. I picked up the documents. The notary stamp was pressed heavily in black ink at the bottom right corner. Arthur Pendleton, my father's former business partner. I ignored the sterile walls. I tuned out the frantic buzzing of the overhead lights. I focused entirely on the arrogant, unyielding lines of my father's face. He was waiting for me to break. He was waiting for the frightened little desk clerk to surrender. I held the deed up between two fingers. You paid Arthur to stamp this, I said, my voice dropping to a dead calm. Marcus crossed his arms. It is perfectly legal. Signed, sealed, and delivered. Arthur Pendleton lost his notary commission 3 years ago, I replied. He was caught forging commercial real estate titles. Marcus's smile froze. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving his skin a pale, sickly gray. His eyes darted to the paper, then back to me. His chest stopped moving. I know this, I continued, dropping the fraudulent document back onto the table. Because I am the federal judge who signed his disbarment order. You just submitted falsified evidence to a federal officer. The silence in the room was absolute. My father's breath hitched in his throat. His hands, gripping the edge of the metal table, began to violently shake. The invincible patriarch was gone, replaced by a terrified old man who had just handed me the rope to hang him. The heavy metal doors of the interrogation room swung open, hitting the wall with a loud, sharp crack. 4 men in dark windbreakers stepped inside. The yellow letters across their backs read FBI. Detective Vance dropped his pen. It clattered across the scratched steel table and rolled off the edge. He backed away, pressing his spine flat against the cinder block wall. He raised both hands, palms out. The arrogant local cop vanished. He was a terrified civilian now, entirely stripped of his bought and paid for authority. Marcus remained frozen in his chair. The blood drained completely from his face, leaving his skin the color of wet ash. He stared at the federal agents closing in on him. His manicured hands twitched violently on his lap. The forged, backdated property deed sat right in the center of the table. It was no longer a clever legal loophole. It was a printed, notarized confession to a national security felony. An agent pulled Marcus to his feet. The metallic snap of handcuffs echoed sharply in the small room. The invincible patriarch of the Bennett family slumped his shoulders, suddenly looking small, fragile, and utterly broken. I grabbed my leather tote bag and walked out into the main lobby. The chaos had already spilled over. Catherine was standing near the vending machines, flanked by 2 more federal agents. Her designer silk blouse was violently wrinkled. One of the agents secured cold steel cuffs around her wrists, the metal snagging the expensive fabric. Above her, a television mounted on the precinct wall played the morning financial news. A bright red banner crawled across the bottom of the screen. Vanessa's tech company IPO was officially halted. Federal criminal investigation pending. Investors were pulling out in droves. $15 million vanished into thin air before the opening bell even had a chance to ring. 14 years ago, my parents stood in a country club parking lot and told me I would never amount to anything. They built an empire on my supposed failures. Today, a single piece of paper and a badge dismantled that entire empire, brick by arrogant brick. My phone vibrated against my hip. I pulled it out. A secure message from the federal marshal's office flashed on the screen. Caleb was out of surgery. The 12-year-old boy was breathing on his own, his vitals stabilizing. 2 armed federal marshals were stationed directly outside his intensive care unit. The witness protection protocol was fully engaged. No bribed local detective would ever get within 100 feet of that child again. Justice was a steel door locked tight around an innocent kid. I slid the phone back into my pocket and walked toward the glass exit doors. "Beatrice!" Catherine screamed, her voice cracked, shrill and frantic, echoing across the linoleum floor. She thrashed against the agents holding her arms. Her perfectly styled hair fell in wild, messy strands across her face, the mask of the cold. Calculating matriarch was completely gone. "You cannot do this to us. We are your family. Tell them to stop." I paused just short of the doors. I turned my head and looked directly into her eyes. The terror pooling in her gaze was entirely selfish. She felt no remorse for the boy bleeding on the pavement. She only felt the agonizing sting of losing her own power. I pushed the heavy glass door open and stepped out into the crisp morning air. I walked to my car, the gravel crunching under my heels. The engine purred to life. I shifted into drive and pulled out of the parking lot. The precinct shrank in my rearview mirror until it disappeared completely. The road ahead was wide open. The gavel came down for the final time in late November, echoing like a gunshot through the oak-paneled room. A federal judge in the adjoining district presided over the trial to maintain absolute impartiality. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish, old paper, and nervous sweat. Marcus and Catherine stood stiffly at the defense table. Their expensive, custom-tailored suits were entirely gone, replaced by standard-issue beige detention uniforms. The judge sentenced Vanessa to 7 years in a federal penitentiary for felony hit-and-run and reckless endangerment, mandating absolutely no possibility of early release for 4 full years. Marcus received a 5-year sentence for federal obstruction of justice, bribery of a law enforcement officer, and witness tampering. Catherine was handed 3 years for her active role in the conspiracy and evidence suppression. The court also ordered immediate restitution of $2,500,000 to Caleb's family, compensating them for ongoing medical care and severe emotional trauma. The social collapse mirrored the legal one, only it happened much faster. The elite Charlotte Country Club revoked the Bennett family memberships before the initial arraignment even concluded. The local newspaper ran the federal indictment details on the front page for 3 consecutive weeks. People my parents used to host at lavish, catered dinner parties suddenly developed severe amnesia regarding their friendship. The grand suburban estate, with its massive bay windows and the cold marble kitchen island where they tried to end my life, went up for public auction. The proceeds barely covered the massive federal fines and the crushing civil liability suit. The Bennett empire simply ceased to exist, erased by a single stroke of a pen. 6 months passed. The brutal, suffocating Carolina summer faded into a crisp, cool autumn. A plain white envelope arrived at my chambers on a quiet Tuesday morning. It bore the return address of a minimum security federal facility in Virginia, the Looping. Elegant handwriting undeniably belonged to Catherine. She used 3 full pages of lined notebook paper to weave the exact same toxic narrative she had pushed my entire life. She wrote extensively about her sacrifices as a mother. She insisted they were only trying to protect Vanessa, claiming my sister was the true star of the family who simply made a tragic mistake. She stated firmly that I owed them my immediate forgiveness because a family must always stick together through difficult times. She ended the letter by demanding I use my judicial influence to secure them better prison accommodations and extended visitation rights. I traced the edge of the cheap paper with my thumb. 14 years ago, reading those words would have sent me into a devastating spiral of guilt. I would have drafted a dozen different replies, desperately seeking a middle ground that simply did not exist. I would have sacrificed my own peace to manage her anxiety. Today, I folded the letter precisely along its original creases. I dropped it directly into the metal wastebasket beside my heavy oak desk. I turned my leather chair back toward my computer monitor and began reviewing a complex intellectual property dispute. My heart rate remained perfectly steady. The silence in my office remained completely unbroken. It is a quiet Sunday morning now. I am standing in my own kitchen, pouring dark roast coffee into 2 thick ceramic mugs. Bright sunlight streams through the open window, carrying the sharp, clean scent of damp pine needles. My longtime law clerk, Eleanor, sits at my small wooden dining table. She is reviewing a stack of appellate briefs, occasionally laughing out loud at a poorly constructed legal argument. She treats me with a steady, unwavering respect. We operate on a foundation of mutual trust, entirely free of manipulation or hidden agendas. A postcard rests on the counter next to a bowl of fresh fruit. It arrived yesterday from an undisclosed, highly secure location in the Midwest. Caleb's father sends one every few months to keep me updated. Caleb is finally out of the wheelchair. He is walking entirely on his own. He joined a local junior baseball league last week and managed to hit a double in his very first game. The air in my house is incredibly light. Nobody walks on eggshells here. Nobody evaluates my worth based on my marital status, the balance of my bank account, or my utility to their grand public image. I am surrounded solely by people who actively choose to be here. Toxic families do not destroy you out of sheer hatred. That is the biggest, most dangerous misconception about familial abuse. They destroy you out of a terrifying, absolute entitlement. They forge your name on a police confession, or steal your financial credit, or demand your total submission, because they genuinely believe your life exists entirely for their convenience. They require your constant failure to validate their success. Your smallness forms the solid concrete foundation for their grandiosity. They desperately need a designated loser in the room so they can continually play the role of the winner. If you are currently carrying the crushing weight of a family that only values you when you are suffering, there are 3 rules you must cement into your mind right now. Rule number 1. Blood is nothing more than a biological accident. Loyalty is a conscious, daily choice. Sharing a genetic code with someone does not grant them a lifelong, unlimited license to use you as a human shield. Rule number 2. The most devastating form of revenge is never screaming. It is never throwing plates against a wall, or sending angry, desperate text messages in the middle of the night, or begging them to finally understand your pain. The ultimate retaliation is the quiet, documented truth. It is a locked digital data file. It is a pristine public record. It is letting their own suffocating arrogance dig the grave, and simply handing them the shovel. Rule number 3. The day you stop auditioning for conditional love is the exact moment your actual life begins. You absolutely cannot heal in the exact same environment that broke you. You have to stand up, walk out the door, and never look back. If you are sitting at a table where your worth is constantly up for debate, when are you going to stand up and walk away? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe for more stories from the other side of silence. I am Beatrice, and I am finally free.